Hello there. Tonight we step into a castle after sunset, when the snow has hardened in the yard and the breath from the horses hangs under the stable roof like pale laundry. The walls around you are thick enough to stop arrows, which is comforting, until you remember they are also thick enough to hold the cold all day and offer it back very politely at night. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your modern standards for central heating, fluffy duvets, and the sacred right to complain about a slightly chilly bedroom. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the chamber is being made ready, tell me where you are listening from and what the local time is there. Someone is awake in Singapore, someone is wrapped in a blanket in Toronto, and someone has already lost one sock. Now, dim the lights, because the castle does not sleep all at once. It closes itself slowly, room by room, with hands, latches, cloth, straw, and habit. You stand inside a private chamber before the worst of the cold comes down. Outside the sky has gone hard and clear. That is the dangerous kind of winter night, the kind that looks beautiful from a distance and then tries to remove your toes one at a time. Inside, the chamber is not warm exactly. Warm is too generous. It is less hostile than the passage outside. And in this household, that counts as a real achievement. The room belongs to someone of rank, though not necessarily a king or great lord. In many medieval castles, the lord and lady's private spaces are not one grand bedroom as in a later palace, but a set of connected chambers, guarded by doors, servants, and custom. The Great Hall may hold the public life of the household, with meals, business, retainers, petitioners, dogs, noise, and smoke. But the chamber is where status begins to withdraw, not completely. Privacy is still a luxury with holes in it. Servants pass in and out. A clerk may wait near the doorway. A lady's maid may know more than anyone would like. Still, the chamber lets the body lower its guard a little. A shutter is being checked at the window. That matters more than it sounds. Glass exists in medieval Europe, of course, and wealthy buildings may have glazed windows, especially in chapels and important rooms, but many castle openings still rely on wooden shutters, horn panes, linen, or oiled coverings, depending on place, date, and money. The hinge complains. A servant presses the board inward, tests the iron catch, then stuffs a thin twist of cloth into the edge where the wind keeps finding its way through. The cold is clever. It never needs a proper invitation. It comes through a crack no wider than a knife back and makes itself at home. The window smells faintly of damp timber and old resin. If horn has been used, scraped thin and set into a frame, it gives the outside world a cloudy, yellowish refusal rather than a view. You do not gaze romantically at the moon through clear glass. You accept a small amount of light in exchange for a large amount of discomfort, which is not an unfamiliar arrangement in medieval architecture. A draught slips beneath the shutter and moves along the wall. The rushes on the floor stir just enough to show you where it travels. The rushes are not decoration. They are part flooring, part insulation, part broom that has not yet become a broom. Fresh rushes, reeds, or straw may be spread over floors in many households, especially in halls and service spaces, sometimes mixed with herbs such as sweet flag, lavender, or meadowsweet when available and affordable. In a well-run chamber, they are kept cleaner than the jokes would have you believe. In a badly run one, they become a history of boots, spilled drink, dog hair, grease, and things best left unnamed after dark. Tonight the top layer has been changed, or at least turned. It releases a dry, grassy smell when your shoe presses down. A woman with a folded cloth over one arm moves along the wall hangings. She is not admiring them. She is checking whether they sit close enough to the stone. Tapestries and hangings do display wealth, yes. They show hunting scenes, saints, vines, beasts with suspiciously human expressions, and noble people doing noble things in clothes much too good for mud. But on a night like this, the picture matters less than the thickness. Wool hanging against stone makes a second wall. It does not turn the chamber into summer. Nothing in this castle turns the chamber into summer, but it slows the cold that seeps through the masonry and gives the room a softer edge. The wall itself is the problem, wearing the mask of protection. Castle stone keeps enemies out, but it also drinks cold from the air. A chamber placed above a heated room may be easier to bear. A room over a vaulted undercroft or near an outer wall may feel as if winter has been filed into the mortar. Mainstream castle life is often imagined as grand and roaring with feasts, but most of its comfort depends on small arrangements. Which wall has cloth? Which window shuts tight? Which door is opened too often? Which servant remembers to block the lower gap with sacking? The written sources leave room for disagreement about how consistently rushes and floor coverings were replaced in different households, because household accounts love payments and quantities more than they love the smell of Tuesday night. They may tell you that rushes were bought, carted, or strewn, but not always whether the old ones were removed as often as a modern nose would prefer. Archaeology adds fragments, literature adds complaints, moralists add disgust. Sometimes because disgust is what moralists keep in their pockets for emergencies. So the truth shifts by region, wealth, season, and the competence of whoever is supposed to be managing the servants. A small chest near the bed is pulled away from the wall. Behind it the stone is darker with damp. Someone mutters, not loudly enough to become disrespectful. The chamber has to be made ready before the household's higher-ranking sleepers arrive, because there are rituals of comfort just as strict as rituals of war. A basin may be set out, a stool placed where a foot will search for it later, a cloak shaken and hung, a candle trimmed. Not too many candles because wax is expensive. Tallow smells, and nobody sensible wastes light on a room full of people trying to sleep. The candle on the table burns with a small, busy flame. It does not illuminate the chamber so much as negotiate with it. The corners stay dim, the painted chest becomes a blocky shape. The wall hanging moves once when air slips under the door. In better houses, beeswax candles burn cleaner and smell faintly sweet. In more ordinary settings, tallow candles made from animal fat can sputter and give off a smell that clings to the nose. That smell is not dramatic, it is simply there, part of the evening, like the creak of leather or the scrape of a bench. Near the doorway, a servant kneels to place a rolled length of cloth against the threshold. This little barrier will not impress a mason, but it may save the ankles. Draft stoppers are not always named neatly in records, because history is often rude about the things that do the actual work. Yet the practice of blocking gaps with cloth, straw, skins, or boards is plain common sense in buildings where doors do not seal like modern ones. The door itself is thick, but the gap beneath it is ambitious. Cold air lies low. It creeps under, touches the rushes, and gathers around your feet with the patience of a tax collector. The chamber's preparation is a chain of small refusals. Refuse the draught, refuse the damp, refuse the outer wall, refuse the cold floor, refuse the idea that stone alone is shelter. A castle is not one warm box. It is a set of warmer and colder pockets, and survival depends on knowing which pocket you are allowed to occupy. Rank decides much of that. The Lord's chamber gets hangings. A child of the household may get a place near the inner wall. A low servant may get a pallet where someone else's comfort has already ended. But even rank cannot command January to behave. A folded cover is carried in. You do not climb into the bed yet. Not quite. The room still has to be coaxed toward night. A maid lifts the edge of a hanging and tucks it more tightly over a nail. Another servant shakes out a cloth with a snap that briefly fills the room, then lets it fall flat. Somewhere beyond the door, a latch drops. The sound travels through the passage, blunt and final. The castle is reducing itself to smaller spaces, closing the cold out where it can, admitting where it must, and pretending, with impressive dignity, that this arrangement is under human control. The rushes scratch softly underfoot as you shift your weight. The shutter holds. The wall hanging settles. The candle shortens by a finger's width. No one says the room is ready, because readiness in this weather is not a state. It is only the point at which nothing more obvious can be done before the sleepers come in, bringing their chilled hands, their layered clothes, their private rank, and the hope that the bed will behave less like furniture and more like a small country with defensible borders. The first thing the bed does is hide its own engineering. At a glance it seems soft, almost generous, with its covers laid smooth and its curtains drawn back in a dark fold. But nothing here is casual. The bed is a built object, a managed space, and on a night like this, it has more in common with a little timber room than with the innocent rectangle you may be used to. The posts rise at the corners. The tester above, when there is one, holds cloth overhead. The curtains hang ready to be pulled in, not for drama, and not only for modesty, but because moving air steals heat like a guest who has overstayed and found the pantry. A servant lifts the upper cover, and the bed exhales the smell of linen, wool, and old dried grasses beneath. The mattress may be filled with straw, chaff, wool flock, feathers, or some mixture depending on wealth, region, and rank. The richer the sleeper, the more likely the bed includes feather bedding, fine linen sheets, and heavy coverlets. Straw does not vanish from high households, though. It remains useful, cheap, replaceable, and obedient to the shape of a tired body. A feather bed is a prize. A straw mattress is a tool. Both need airing, turning, beating, and guarding from damp. The sheet nearest the skin is linen, and linen has its own winter manners. It feels clean, but at first touch it may feel cold enough to make the shoulders rise. Nobody with sense wants to slide bare into that. The bed has to be warmed by bodies, by covers, by time, and sometimes by small heated objects brought before sleep. For now, the servant lays a hand briefly under the top cover, checking whether the bedding has taken on the chill of the chamber. Of course it has. Everything has. Even the wooden frame seems to have listened too closely to the weather. You sit at the edge, not yet surrendering your weight. The mattress gives with a dry whisper. Somewhere inside it, straw shifts against straw. That sound is not unpleasant. It is practical. The bed is not a cloud. Medieval people are not sleeping in clouds unless a poet is being paid to flatter someone. The bedding has lumps, seams, edges, and decisions. If it is stuffed with straw, the sharper ends have a talent for finding the places where cloth has thinned. If it is feather-filled, it can hold warmth beautifully, but it must be protected from damp and pests, because comfort always attracts tiny administrators of ruin. The bedclothes arrive in layers, a blanket of wool, dense and heavy, a coverlet that may be woven, quilted or lined, perhaps of fur if the household is wealthy enough and the owner likes the feel and smell of animal skin near the body. Furs are not just display. Squirrel, rabbit, lambskin and other pelts can be used in garments and bedding, though exactly what appears on this bed depends on rank and account books rather than fantasy. A noble inventory might list mattresses, bolsters, blankets, sheets and coverlets with care, because textiles are valuable property. A blanket is not just bedding, it is money that keeps you from shivering. You pull the cover a little closer, and its weight gives an immediate kind of reassurance. Heavy bedding does not warm by magic. It slows the body's heat from escaping. Wool traps air in its fibres. Linen manages sweat and skin. Straw beneath raises the body above the cold frame and gives a layer between you and the floor's stored chill. The mainstream fact is simple and unromantic. Before modern heating, people survived winter nights by combining insulation, enclosed sleeping spaces, layered textiles, and shared heat, not by making entire stone buildings comfortably warm. The room loses, the bed negotiates. The pillows, if you have them, are not the overfed mountains of a modern hotel. A bolster may run across the head of the bed, smaller pillows may support the neck. In some houses, a person uses folded clothing or a rolled blanket. In a high-status chamber, the bed can be dressed in a way that announces the household's rank, even while everyone is trying not to freeze. Fine sheets may be displayed, then turned down. Embroidered covers may sit above plainer warmth. The eye gets its ceremony before the body gets its shelter. This is a very human arrangement, really, looking respectable while privately needing 3 more blankets. The curtains are pulled inward at last. The change is immediate, though not dramatic. The chamber sounds duller. The candlelight becomes cloth-coloured. The air inside the bed space grows still, and still air is precious. Bed curtains in medieval and later households provide privacy, block drafts, and trap warmth around sleepers. They also contain breath, smells, and the small dampness of bodies, so comfort is never perfectly elegant. A closed bed can grow close by morning, but close is better than freezing. You accept the bargain. The material record complicates the question of how common fully curtained beds were across every level of medieval society. Because beds survive badly, fabric survives worse, and written records favour people rich enough to own things worth recording. In aristocratic and wealthy urban households, there is solid evidence for elaborate beds with hangings and textiles. Lower down the social ladder, sleeping arrangements are plainer, more crowded, and less often described. So you do not imagine every person in every castle folding themselves into a magnificent carved bed. Many are on pallets, benches, truckle beds, or mattresses laid where there is room. But here, inside the better chamber, the curtained bed is doing quiet work. A small oddity sits near the bedding, a cord tied to gather one curtain where the sleeper's hand can reach it. It is not a grand invention, it is a practical mercy. Once you're inside, buried under wool, with cold lying around the bed like a patient animal, you do not want to expose an arm to grope for loose fabric. The curtain cord lets you close the last gap without sitting up fully. Another little domestic trick: a bed may be made with a warmer side away from the outer wall, so the person of higher rank gets the better position. Even sleep has seating plans. The order of bodies matters. If 2 people share the bed, the warmer middle becomes desirable, though nobody says this too bluntly unless manners have already gone to bed. A married couple, siblings, children, servants, guests, or attendants may share sleeping space depending on rank, age, necessity, and household custom. In elite settings, sharing a bed does not always carry the private meaning a modern listener might assume. Beds are expensive, rooms are limited, and warmth is a communal resource. To sleep alone in winter can be a luxury. It can also be an error. Your feet slide under the first layer and object to the whole historical experiment. The sheet is cold, the wool above is heavy. The mattress gives again with that dry internal scrape. You draw your knees slightly because curled limbs waste less heat than a noble, dignified sprawl. Dignity is easier in paintings. In bed, the body becomes practical. The hands tuck under the arms, the chin lowers, the cap on the head stays where it is, because so much heat escapes from an uncovered head in a cold room, and because waking with icy ears is not an improving spiritual exercise. There is a faint tickle at the wrist where a straw end has found a path through the mattress covering. This is the sort of detail that rarely appears in heroic chronicles. No bard pauses a siege narrative to mention that the lord's cousin has been stabbed all night by bedding. Yet the small irritations matter. They determine whether sleep comes easily or in pieces. They make people turn, mutter, kick, borrow warmth, rearrange covers, and blame the person beside them for drafts they did not create. A final cover is drawn up. The curtain falls into place. The bed narrows the world to cloth, breath, weight, and the muffled chamber beyond. The cold has not disappeared. It presses against the outer fabric, waits along the floor, gathers around the posts. But inside the layers, your own warmth begins to meet itself. Slowly, the linen stops feeling like river water. The straw below settles into the shape of your hip and shoulder. The wool above becomes less like a burden and more like a roof. Somewhere outside the curtain, a servant steps away, careful not to jolt the frame, and the small fortress of the bed holds its first pocket of night. Beyond the curtain, the chamber keeps making small noises. Cloth shifts where the draught worries at it. The bed frame gives one low wooden click as the colder air pulls at its joints. Then, from the hearth, comes the sound that matters most, a soft collapse inside the fire, not loud enough to startle anyone, but enough to remind every person in the room that warmth is not a condition, it is a task. The fire has been lowered for the night. No sensible household leaves a great blaze roaring beside sleepers, curtains, rushes, wooden chests, hanging cloth, and a bed that is basically a polite pile of expensive kindling. Fire is comfort, but it is also appetite. It eats wood, oxygen, attention, and occasionally houses. Medieval castles are made of stone in the places you admire from outside, but inside they contain timber floors, beams, screens, furniture, bedding, baskets, and all the dry little things that make a room usable. A castle can burn very well when given encouragement. The hearth sits against the wall, its stones darker where heat has worked on them for years. In many medieval great halls, an open hearth may stand in the centre, with smoke rising toward a louver in the roof, especially in earlier arrangements. Private chambers, kitchens, and later or more developed spaces often use wall fireplaces and flues. That is one of the mainstream changes in medieval domestic comfort. The spread of fireplaces and chimneys allows heat to be brought into more rooms, though never as evenly or as dependably as modern heating. A chimney is not central heating. It is a vertical argument with smoke. Tonight the argument is only partly won. A servant has arranged the embers so they hold together under a grey skin of ash. That ash is useful. It slows the burn, keeps the core alive, and lets the fire be woken later without beginning from nothing. A log rests at the edge, not fully feeding yet. Too much wood and the room may overheat near the hearth, while the far side remains mean and cold. Too little, and the embers die before the deepest part of the night. Whoever tends this fire is not simply tossing logs about like a cheerful rustic in a holiday picture. This is fuel management, and fuel costs money. Wood has to be cut, carted, stacked, dried, guarded, and rationed. A castle household consumes it in kitchens, ovens, brewhouses, laundries, workshops, chambers, and halls. Charcoal may be used for certain tasks. Peat may appear in some regions. Brushwood and faggots feed quick heat. Larger logs give longer burn. The best fuel for warming a sleeping chamber is not always the same as the best fuel for cooking pottage or heating water. Even comfort has categories. Inside the bed, the heat reaches you indirectly. The fire does not warm the entire room like a modern radiator. It creates a zone. Near the hearth, a person can almost relax. Near the outer wall, the cold still has paperwork to finish. The bed curtains do much of what the fire cannot. They trap the warmth already made by bodies and bedding. The hearth helps the chamber avoid becoming entirely bitter, but it cannot redeem every stone surface. You may be noble enough to sleep behind curtains, but the room is still negotiating with winter in patches. A servant crosses the floor with careful steps. The rushes hush beneath his shoes. He uses an iron tool to nudge the embers. The glow brightens, red through the ash, then dims again as he covers it back. Fire irons are ordinary objects, but they have a quiet authority at night. A poker or rake can save heat, prevent waste, and keep sparks from leaping where they should not. There may be a fire guard or screen, though forms vary. And not every chamber has the neat protections a cautious modern mind would request in writing. Medieval fire safety is partly equipment and partly vigilance. Also, if we are honest, partly luck. A quirky little practice found in many pre-modern households in different forms is banking the fire so it can be carried through the night like a sleeping animal. Embers are tucked under ash, sometimes with a piece of slow-burning fuel, so morning does not begin with cold tinder and bad language. The household may also preserve coals in a covered vessel or borrow a live coal from another fire if one goes out. This sounds minor until you imagine every finger in the room stiff, every mouth dry, and the tinder damp enough to act superior. The surviving evidence refuses to settle the question of how often chamber fires were kept burning all night in different castles. Household accounts may list fuel purchases. Architectural remains show fireplaces and chimneys. Instructions and later domestic practice suggest careful night management, but the exact habit depends on rank, weather, building design, local fuel supply, and the temper of whoever pays the bills. A royal chamber during a hard frost is not the same as a tower room for a minor retainer. The records give heat in expenses. The body receives it in inches. Smoke has its own behaviour. It does not obey rank as reliably as people do. If the chimney draws well, the chamber breathes better. If the wind presses wrong against the flue, smoke may hesitate, spill, or curl back into the room. It can sting the eyes, sour the throat, and settle into cloth. The bed curtains that keep warmth in may also hold the faint scent of smoke from many nights before. Nothing smells purely clean in a working winter chamber. Linen, wool, ash, warm stone, damp leather, and banked fire all take turns. A sudden spark cracks in the hearth. No one gasps. Everyone waits half a beat. The servant looks. The spark has died on stone. That is enough. The world continues. The curtain by your shoulder barely moves, but you know the hearth is there, not from light alone, but from the way the chamber has a warmer side and a colder side. Medieval sleep is mapped by these invisible borders. The person on the inner side of the bed may have better warmth. The one closer to the room may feel every servant's movement and every draught from the door. Comfort is not only owned, it is positioned. The fire also controls time. As it lowers, the night deepens. A bright flame belongs to work, talk, undressing, washing, arranging. Embers belong to endurance. They are quieter. They ask less of the eyes. In the reddish dullness, the chamber loses its painted surfaces. The chest becomes shape. The stool becomes risk. The folded cloak becomes a dark animal until someone remembers where it was placed. This is why people know their rooms by touch. The bed cord, the chest corner, the step near the hearth, the place where the floorboard complains. Memory is safer than sight when candles are expensive and flames are being saved. The servant sets the iron tool aside where it will not be stepped on in the dark. That placement matters. A bad placement becomes a bruise before dawn. He bends once more, lifts a small coal that has rolled too close to the edge, and returns it to the ashbed. His hands move with the calm of someone who has done this through many winters and does not need to make a performance of competence. The room depends on such people. Their names may not survive in accounts beyond wages, if that. Yet the Lord's sleep, the lady's hands, the child's lungs, the old dog's spot near the hearth, all rest on small acts performed before anyone praises them. The fire settles again. One log, half consumed, gives a narrow orange line along its split side. Heat gathers in the stones behind it and loosens slowly into the room. The bed holds what it can. Your feet are still not warm, but they are less offended. The wool above your knees has begun to feel human. Outside the curtains, the servant pauses, listening for the next instruction. None comes. He lowers the light, leaves the iron where it can be found, and steps toward the door with the careful guilt of a person about to let cold air in. The door opens only a hand's breadth, and the cold enters as if it has been waiting with excellent manners. It slips low across the rushes, reaches the bed curtains, and finds the small gap near your shoulder before the servant pulls the door shut again. The latch settles. The chamber returns to its smaller noises. Inside the bed, the first answer is not bravery, it is clothing. You do not sleep as a modern person might, stripped down to a thin shirt and faith in the thermostat. That would be an act of optimism with poor evidence. Your body keeps its layers because the room has not earned your trust. A linen shift or shirt stays nearest the skin. Over it, depending on who you are and how bitter the night has become, there may be a woolen garment kept on longer than comfort would prefer, stockings not removed, a cap tied under the chin, perhaps even a cloak drawn over the bedding for extra weight. Medieval people certainly undress for bed in many contexts, and nightclothes exist, but winter makes negotiation more important than neat categories. The linen at your neck has warmed now. That matters. Linen washes better than wool, and protects outer garments from sweat and skin oils, which is one reason shifts and shirts are so important in medieval dress. Wool gives warmth, but wool is not something everyone wants directly against the body all night. It can scratch, hold smells, and become damp in ways that make mourning unpleasant. So the layers are not simply piled on at random, they answer different problems: clean skin, trapped heat, modesty, expense, and the very practical question of how quickly you can rise if someone calls from the corridor. Your cap is the least glamorous piece of survival. It may be linen, wool, or some plain wrapped head covering, but it earns its place. A covered head keeps warmth where the body badly wants to lose it. More than that, it keeps the ears from that sharp ache that makes a person wake angry at architecture. Men and women in medieval Europe commonly wear head coverings by day according to custom, status, occupation, and modesty rules. And some form of night headwear is a sensible extension when rooms are cold. Nobody needs to make it poetic. It is a small roof for the skull. A string under the chin rubs once when you turn. It is not painful, it is simply annoying in the way useful things often are. If the knot is too tight, it presses. If too loose, the cap slides backward and exposes one ear, which immediately begins filing a complaint. You adjust it with 2 fingers beneath the blanket. That small movement lets in a ribbon of cold, so you stop quickly. The best winter gesture is the one that ends before the bedding notices. At the foot of the bed, your stockings remain on. In a polite summer chamber, perhaps they would be removed and set aside. Tonight the feet vote otherwise. Medieval legwear varies by century, region, sex, and rank. Hose, chausses, stockings, footed or footless, tied or gartered, sometimes separate for each leg, sometimes joined in later fashions. But whatever the form, warm covered feet are not a luxury when the bed has spent the day absorbing cold from an unheated room. Bare feet against linen can feel like placing a living thing on a slab. There is a faint smell of damp wool near the lower covers. Not filth exactly, more like a garment that has worked all day, dried badly, and been forgiven because there is no better option ready. Clothing in a castle household is valuable. It is brushed, aired, mended, turned, passed down, and guarded. A sleeve with good cloth left in it may become part of something else later. A cloak may serve by day as status and by night as a blanket. The boundary between clothing and bedding is not always firm. When winter presses hard enough, anything warm becomes part of the bed's argument. A lesser-known habit, practical rather than charming, is the use of extra wrappings around vulnerable spots. A cloth around the neck, a loose hood kept close, or even spare hose tucked near the feet before sleep so they will not be ice-stiff at waking. In some households, people may put tomorrow's linen or stockings under a cover or near the body, not because they enjoy sleeping with laundry, but because dressing in frozen cloth at dawn is a punishment usually reserved for people who have made very poor choices. Warm clothing is often just clothing that did not spend the night alone. Researchers are still split on the question of how sharply we should separate night clothes from ordinary underclothes in many medieval contexts. Later inventories and images show sleeping garments, caps, and bed linens more clearly for some groups, while earlier evidence can be uneven. A word in an account may not tell whether a garment is reserved for bed, used after washing, worn under daytime clothing, or pressed into service because the chamber is bitterly cold. The sources give cloth, names, and costs. They do not always give shivering. You tuck your hands deeper into your sleeves. This is not elegant, but elegance has stepped outside and frozen. The sleeve becomes a pocket of breath-warmed air. Your fingers curl toward your palms. Rings, if worn, are poor companions in this weather. Metal carries cold with insulting efficiency. A person of rank may remove them before bed, partly for comfort, partly for safety, partly because valuables are managed carefully at night. A lower status sleeper may have no rings to worry about, which is one of the few ways poverty simplifies the evening. The body learns where heat leaks: the neck, the wrists, the ankles, the space where the blanket lifts near the shoulder, the line down the back if a shirt has twisted. You make small corrections, pull cloth, flatten a fold, trap one foot against the other, press knees together. There is nothing heroic in it. It is an inventory of openings. The castle walls may have arrow slits and guarded gates, but your own clothing has its own weak points, and winter is very interested in them. Beyond the curtain, someone coughs once near the hearth. Not a deep illness cough, just smoke finding a throat. The servant's cloak brushes a chest. Then quiet. You picture him keeping more clothing on than any bedtime painting would bother to show. Servants sleeping in colder places may lie down in much of what they wore during the day, loosening only what must be loosened. Belts come off because buckles bite and tools jab the ribs. Shoes may be removed if soaked or muddy, but sometimes kept near enough to seize in darkness. A person called from sleep to carry water, tend fire, answer a door, or attend a superior cannot spend 10 minutes assembling themselves like a court display. Your own belt is gone. That relief is real. Medieval clothing can support pouches, knives, keys, rosaries, tablets, seals, and the small cargo of daily life. At night, those things must be set where they can be found but not stolen, knocked into rushes, or stepped on. The absence of a belt lets the breath move lower. The loosened garment traps warmth without pinning the body. A tight lace or tied point left wrong can wake you with numbness, or a seam pressed into the skin. Comfort depends on knowing what to loosen and what never to remove. The bed is warmer now, but not evenly. Your chest has begun to settle. Your feet still lag behind, stubborn little provinces at the edge of the kingdom. The cap holds, the stockings help. The sleeve around your hand smells faintly of wool, skin, and the cold passage you crossed earlier. It is not the scent of luxury. It is the scent of fabric doing more than one job. A slight draught presses at the curtain and fails to enter fully. You keep still, because stillness is part of the clothing. Every movement pumps warm air out and invites cold air in. The layers work best when the body cooperates. Under linen, wool, stockings, cap, blanket, coverlet, and the dim roof of the bed curtains, you begin to understand why removing everything for sleep would seem less like freedom and more like foolish generosity toward winter. Your shoulder lowers. Your fingers unclench inside the sleeve. Beside you, if someone shares the bed, their warmth is no longer an intrusion but a resource, arriving through cloth, breath, and the careful silence of two people trying not to disturb the pocket of heat they have only just begun to make. That warmth from the other body is awkward before it is comforting. At first it is a knee too near yours, an elbow making a claim, a shoulder shifting the wool and letting in a thin complaint of air. Then the bed closes again, and the heat gathers between you in a way no single blanket can manage by itself. Nobody needs to say thank you. Gratitude at midnight in a freezing chamber is mostly expressed by not kicking. Sharing a bed is not automatically scandalous here. That is a modern assumption dressed up as certainty. In many medieval households, beds are valuable, rooms are crowded, and sleep is arranged by rank, kinship, service, safety, and available space. A married couple may share, of course. Children may sleep near parents or attendants. Servants may lie together on pallets. Travellers at inns often share beds with strangers, sometimes head to foot, sometimes with rules and complaints, and the kind of wary politeness that develops when everyone knows the bedding is doing its best. Warmth is part of the arrangement, but so are economy and custom. Inside this chamber, the rules are quieter, but still present. The highest-ranking sleeper has the best position. That may mean the warmer side, farther from the curtain gap, away from the draught that creeps near the bed's outer edge. If two people share the main bed, one does not simply sprawl across the middle like a conquering duke of blankets. Space reflects status even when eyes are closed. A lord may take the inner place. A lady may have attendants close enough to answer. A child may be tucked nearer the adult whose body can spare heat. A servant does not climb into the noble bed unless the household order allows it, and household order is very fond of not being misunderstood. The body beside you shifts again, careful this time. Cloth rasps on cloth. A foot finds a warmer hollow and then withdraws slightly, because even in winter there are limits to friendship. The bed's shared air is growing close. Breath warms the enclosed space. The curtains hold it. The wool holds it. Two bodies turn a poor arrangement into a working one. This is one of the plain facts of pre-modern winter sleep. Communal sleeping was often a practical response to limited heated space and limited bedding, not merely a sign of poverty or lack of privacy. Privacy matters, but survival tends to argue in a louder voice. A pallet lies beyond the bed curtains, close enough that the sleeper there can hear every movement from inside. That may be a maidservant, a page, a child, a nurse, or another household member depending on the chamber and the rank of the person in the bed. The pallet is lower, thinner, nearer the draught. It may be stuffed with straw or chaff, covered with a blanket that has seen better winters, and placed where the servant can rise quickly if called. Sleep is not equal in this room. It has levels. The bed is the small fortress. The pallet is the outer ward. From that lower place comes a small sound, someone pulling a cover over one ear. The gesture is familiar across centuries. On the floor, the cold has better access. Air moves under the bed before it is slowed by hangings. Rushes help, but they do not turn stone or boards into mercy. The servant on the pallet may keep clothing on, arms folded inside sleeves, knees drawn up. If the fire needs attention, if the sleeper in the bed asks for water, if a child coughs, the person on the floor rises first. A warm body can also be an alarm system, which is less charming when you are the alarm. A curious little arrangement appears in some households, the truckle bed, a low bed that can slide beneath a larger one during the day and be pulled out at night. It saves space and keeps an attendant close. The idea is simple enough to be almost funny. In daylight, your bed disappears under someone else's bed like a cautious animal. At night, it emerges, lower, colder, and socially accurate. Not every castle chamber uses one, and the evidence varies by place and period. But the principle is clear. Sleeping furniture can express hierarchy as efficiently as any seating plan at dinner. Scholars continue to disagree about how far we should read intimacy into medieval shared sleeping arrangements, because the same physical fact can mean different things in different contexts. A shared bed may signal marriage, kinship, service, travel necessity, poverty, hospitality, nursing, or simple lack of space. Moral and legal sources sometimes worry over who sleeps where. Household accounts may simply list beds and bedding without explaining the human arrangement. Images can be stylized, so the safest path is not to flatten every shared bed into one meaning. In winter, at least, the practical meaning presses hard. One body helps another body stay warm. The person beside you has begun breathing more slowly. Not asleep yet, but close. Their warmth reaches you through linen and wool in dull waves. You adjust your legs with great caution. A gap opens near the knee. Cold enters immediately, sharp and smug. You close it again. The lesson is quick. Stillness protects the pocket you have made. A shared bed requires cooperation even when nobody is fully awake. Someone who tosses, steals covers, or insists on sleeping like a saint laid out for painting becomes a household problem in miniature. The rules around modesty still matter. People may sleep in shifts, shirts, caps, veils, or other coverings. They do not necessarily strip bare simply because bodies are near. Linen acts as a barrier, as does custom. In a high-status chamber, servants may be nearby while their betters prepare for bed, and that does not erase the boundaries between them. It sharpens them. The servant sees what is required to serve, and then sees less. Eyes lower, curtains close, speech becomes minimal. Privacy is managed by behaviour as much as by walls. A child, if one is present in the chamber, may be given the warmest small place available, not always from sentiment, though there is plenty of ordinary tenderness in medieval households when the sources allow us to glimpse it. Children lose heat quickly. Infants and younger children are more vulnerable to cold. A nurse or mother may keep a small body close, and the bedding becomes both shelter and responsibility. You hear a quiet murmur, perhaps only someone settling a restless sleeper. The sound disappears into wool. Lower in the castle, other bodies share worse arrangements. Guards may sleep near one another for warmth in a gatehouse chamber when duty allows. Kitchen servants may bed down near residual heat, if not chased away by work. Pages and grooms may sleep in crowded spaces that smell of leather, damp wool, rushes, and the day's labour. Shared warmth is not romantic there. It is elbows, tired feet, borrowed blanket edges, and the delicate politics of who has washed least recently. Medieval community, at 3 a.m, is sometimes just not rolling onto another person's hand. Back inside the curtained bed, the warmth is becoming real enough that your shoulders loosen. The room outside remains cold, but the bed has its own climate now. It is close, slightly damp from breath, faintly smoky from the chamber, edged with the smell of wool and warmed linen. The body beside you is no longer an inconvenience. It is part of the mechanism, as necessary as the curtain cord and the blanket weight. You do not need to like every part of the arrangement. The past is full of useful things that are not arranged for personal preference. A foot presses yours for a moment, then rests there. Perhaps by accident, perhaps not. The contact is permitted because nobody comments on it. Heat moves slowly through stockings. The shared pocket holds. Beyond the curtain, the pallet sleeper turns once, rushes whisper, and the banked fire gives a muted shift in the ash. Every person in the chamber is placed somewhere on the ladder of comfort, and yet all of you are answering the same winter with the same basic truth. A single body is fragile. But bodies near one another can make a night just bearable enough to pass through. The cold at the curtain's edge is not coming from one place. That is what makes it so patient. It does not rush in like a dropped bucket of water. It arrives from the wall, the floor, the window, the stair, the little seam where timber meets stone, the hidden crack where mortar has aged and pulled back from itself. The bed keeps its pocket of warmth, but beyond it the castle is still a body made of stone, and stone has no interest in your comfort. The outer wall nearest the bed has stored the day badly. In summer, thick masonry can keep a chamber cool. In winter, especially during a long freeze, it becomes a slow reservoir of cold. The wall does not merely feel cold when touched. It radiates cold into the room, drawing warmth from the air and from anything placed too near it. A chair against that wall chills the person who sits there. A chest pressed against it may gather damp behind the boards. A blanket stored there may emerge with a limp, unpleasant coolness, as if it has been keeping company with a well. This is why bed placement matters. The bed is not simply set wherever it looks handsome. It is kept away from the worst drafts when space allows. It may stand against an inner wall nearer the hearth, or in a recessed area where hangings can help. In some castles, private chambers occupy upper floors or solar rooms, chosen for light, status, and separation from the hall. But upper does not always mean warmer. Wind worries at towers. Stairwells pull air like chimneys. A corner room with 2 outer walls can make a noble sleeper feel less like the master of a fortress and more like a well-wrapped onion left in a pantry. Beyond the chamber door, a spiral stair twists downward through the thickness of the wall. It is not in the room, but it affects the room. Cold air collects in stone passages, runs along floors, and enters whenever a door opens. Spiral stairs are compact, defensible, and practical for vertical movement inside towers, but in winter they behave like narrow wells of night. The steps hold damp. The handrail, if there is one, feels unpleasantly alive with cold. Anyone coming from below carries that air with them in sleeves and cloak folds, then releases it into the chamber like an apology no one asked for. A servant has hung an extra cloth near the door, not quite a curtain, not quite a screen. It breaks the direct path of air when someone enters. This is one of those plain domestic defences that rarely earns admiration. Grand stonework survives. Cloth rots. The account may mention fabric bought for hangings, repairs, or chamber use, while the exact way it was pinned, shifted, and cursed at during a frost is left to the imagination. Yet on this night, the cloth is doing more for your ankles than the battlements. The mainstream fact hiding under all this discomfort is that medieval castles were primarily defensive and administrative residences, not purpose-built machines for thermal comfort. They could be made comfortable by the standards of wealth at the time, especially with fireplaces, tapestries, wooden panelling, glazed windows, rugs, and servants, but their stone shells remained hard to heat evenly. The great strength of a castle wall is exactly the thing that makes it stubborn at night. It keeps the enemy outside. It also keeps yesterday's frost inside the room longer than anyone would like. You shift slightly beneath the covers and feel the difference between sides of the bed. The side toward the room is cooler. The side nearer the other sleeper is warmer. The side facing the wall has a strange, dead chill, softened by curtain and blanket, but still present, like a hand held nearby without touching. If your shoulder slips too close to the curtain, the air there is cooler and more mobile. You move back toward the shared centre. No speech is needed. The body understands masonry before the mind begins making theories about it. A small niche in the wall holds a cup, a folded cloth, and perhaps a candle stub saved for later. Wall niches are useful because thick walls create deep openings and recesses, but anything kept in them inherits the stone's mood. Water left near an outer wall may be painfully cold by morning. In a severe frost, water in exposed places can freeze, especially in unheated service areas. Wine or ale may fare better depending on strength and storage, but nobody mistakes a stone niche in January for a friendly cupboard. The cup waits there with the chilly dignity of an object that knows it will be blamed at dawn. Nobody entirely agrees on whether certain window arrangements in castles were chosen more for comfort, display, defence, or a shifting mixture of all three. The surviving evidence depends heavily on date and region. Arrow loops, shuttered windows, glazed chambers, and later larger domestic openings all belong to different building phases and priorities. A narrow slit may keep out wind better than a broad opening, but it also gives little light. A larger window gives status and view, then demands shutters, glazing, cloth, or patience when winter comes. Architecture does not answer with one voice. It mutters through alterations, repairs, and expensive compromises. The window in this chamber is not large enough to be grand, but it is large enough to matter. Its recess makes a cold pocket. The shutter's ironwork gives off a metal chill. Around the edges, the stuffing cloth has begun to stiffen where damp air touches it. In the morning, someone will pull it loose and shake out tiny crumbs of frost or grit, depending on how the night goes. For now, it stays packed in place. A poor seal at a window can undo a surprising amount of bedding. The castle may have survived sieges, but one badly fitted shutter can still win a private battle against your left shoulder. The floor participates as well. Stone paving, tile, or timber boards over cold spaces all steal warmth differently. In an upper chamber with boards, the floor may be less brutal than stone, but gaps between boards can breathe cold air from below. If the room is paved, rushes, mats, carpets, or wooden platforms become valuable. A bare foot on a winter floor is a quick education. Even through stockings, the floor reminds you who owns the season. This is why shoes stay close, why stools matter, why people step where rushes are thickest, and why getting out of bed is postponed until necessity becomes rude. A little oddity of castle design appears in the way warmth changes from one room to the next. A garderobe passage, a mural chamber, a stair recess, or a small service space can become colder than the main room, not because anyone intended discomfort as decoration, but because thick walls contain cavities and channels where air lingers. Some latrine shafts built into walls can be deeply unpleasant in winter for reasons both thermal and otherwise. A person using one during a hard frost receives a very direct lesson in the limits of noble architecture. There are moments when rank offers privacy, but not mercy. The bed curtains move once more. Someone outside has crossed near the door without opening it. Even that disturbs the room's air. The castle is never perfectly still. Heat rises through shafts and stairwells. Cold settles in passages. Smoke tests chimneys. Doors leak. Floors remember what lies beneath them. The chamber is less a sealed room than a negotiated border between warmer human arrangements and the larger frozen structure that contains them. Your hand, still tucked in the sleeve, reaches toward the curtain and stops before touching it. The cloth is cooler on the outside. You can sense it without needing proof. That is the strange intimacy of winter in stone buildings. The room teaches you to read distance by temperature. Near the body, warmth. Near the bed edge, risk. Near the wall, refusal. Near the hearth, a fading promise. Near the door, interruption. Every place has a different answer. The other sleeper shifts closer, perhaps without waking. The shared heat thickens again under the blanket. Outside the curtain, the chamber remains divided into zones no map would show. A stool waits in a cold patch. The chest hides damp behind it. The wall hangings hang bravely against stone they cannot fully persuade. The shutter holds because someone wedged it well. The door cloth sags slightly, still blocking the lower draft. The castle stands massive around you, proud and half frozen, keeping danger beyond the walls, while sending the season inward through every surface it owns. The wall hanging nearest the bed gives a small, tired sag, as if it too has spent the day resisting the weather and would like a little recognition. Its lower edge is not perfectly straight. One corner has pulled where the fastening bites the fabric. The woven figure on it, perhaps a hunter or a saint, or a beast with more confidence than anatomy, faces the chamber with dyed wool patience. The picture is almost beside the point now. What matters is the thickness. Fabric makes a second skin for the room. It softens the stone without changing it, the way a glove softens a frozen hand without persuading winter to leave. Tapestries and wall hangings are among the great luxuries of medieval elite life, but they are also portable insulation. They can be moved between residences, taken down, cleaned, repaired, displayed for ceremony, and hung where cold walls need quieting. A noble household may travel with its textiles, because lordship itself moves from manor to castle to hunting lodge, and comfort must be packed, carted, unrolled, and hung again by people whose fingers do the real work. A servant outside the bed curtains adjusts a hanging pole with a muted scrape. The cloth lifts and drops. The chamber's sound changes. Stone gives sound a hard edge. Fabric absorbs it. The fire's little cracks become duller. Footsteps lose their sharpness. A cough does not travel as far. In a cold bedroom, that softness matters almost as much as warmth. It makes the room feel inhabited rather than occupied by masonry. The wall is still there behind the woven wool, but it has been taught to behave a little. Not every hanging is a grand tapestry full of noble scenes. Some are simpler wool cloths, painted cloths, dyed lengths, curtains, or coverlets pressed into wall duty when frost becomes persuasive. Wealth decides quality. Need decides placement. In the best chambers, a set of hangings may match, telling a story or displaying heraldic signs. In more practical corners, a plain cloth may hang behind the bed because nobody sees it much, and the stone there is particularly spiteful. Medieval households are good at this kind of mixed logic. Splendour in one panel, patchwork common sense in the next. The mainstream fact is worth feeling through your shoulder. Textiles were among the most valuable possessions in many medieval elite households. Inventories list beds, hangings, carpets, cushions, cloths of estate, and coverlets with care, because they represent wealth as surely as silver cups do. A tapestry is not merely decoration, it is capital with pictures on it. It can proclaim lineage, brighten a chamber, impress guests, block drafts, and keep a sleeper from feeling the cold breath of an outer wall. One object, several jobs. Medieval comfort often works that way. The bed curtains belong to the same world of useful fabric. Inside them the air grows more stable. Outside them the chamber remains patchy. The curtains hang from rods or cords around the bed, depending on the bed's form, and they create a smaller room within the larger one. A person of status sleeps not simply in a bed, but within an arranged textile enclosure. It is privacy, warmth, rank, and stagecraft. During the day, the curtains may be opened to display the bed as property and symbol. At night, they close, because symbols are less important than knees. A small fringe brushes your wrist when the curtain moves. It is rougher than it looks. Dye and weave have their own texture. Some tapestries are thick enough to feel almost board-like when folded, especially if lined or aged. Dust hides in them. So do smells. Smoke from the hearth, damp from walls, the faint animal scent of wool, herbs from rushes, and the dry note of old wood all settle into cloth. The chamber does not smell like one thing. It smells like stored winters. A quirky detail lives in the backs of these grand fabrics. The reverse of a tapestry can look like a private argument among threads, knots, and faded colours. Servants handling them know the backside well. They see repairs, patched slits, weak seams, places where moths have been discouraged with herbs, cedar, airing, brushing, or simple vigilance. Moths are tiny enemies with excellent taste. A household may guard a costly hanging from pests with more anxiety than it guards a mediocre cousin. The cousin may at least feed himself. Specialists still hesitate over whether some surviving references to painted cloths in domestic settings should be understood as cheaper substitutes for woven tapestry, separate decorative traditions, temporary hangings, or all of these depending on context. The words in inventories can be slippery. A clerk may record material, use, or location without describing thickness, warmth, or the quality of the room. The surviving fabric itself is rare, and the pieces that last are often the exceptional ones. So the poorer, plainer, more draft-blocking cloths disappear first, from both rooms and memory, though they may have done the most honest winter work. Near the door, the extra screen shifts again. It may be a folding screen, a hanging, or just cloth arranged to catch the draft before it reaches the bed. Screens can shape a chamber without building a wall. They create a place to dress, a barrier for a servant's pallet, a buffer around a wash basin, or a defence against air that has slipped in from the stair. A screen also teaches the body where not to stand. On its far side, the air is sharper. On this side, it is merely cold. That distinction is not small. The fabric changes how rank is seen. If a lord or lady sleeps behind heavy curtains, the bed becomes a controlled space. Servants may approach, but not enter without cause. A voice can pass through cloth while the body remains hidden. That matters in a household where people are always nearby. The curtain lets command continue from within warmth. A request for water, a cloak, a chamber pot, another cover, or the fire iron can be made without exposing the sleeper fully to the room. Authority, like heat, is easier to keep when properly enclosed. Your own breath has dampened the air inside the bed a little. The curtain near your face is warmer on the inner side. If you press too close, the cloth cools your skin through the linen cap. You shift back. Outside, the tapestry on the wall takes the cold directly, and behind it the stone remains unconverted. This is not modern insulation sealed into a cavity. It is fabric against a hard surface, useful but imperfect. If the hanging is too close to damp stone for too long, it risks mildew. If pulled away, it insulates less. Comfort has to be balanced against rot, which is a very medieval sort of compromise. The fire gives a soft inward fall. The woven hunting dog on the wall seems to lean slightly as the hanging settles. Maybe the design was expensive once. Maybe it arrived as a marriage gift, a lordly purchase, a prize, a hand-me-down from a greater house, or a tired cloth demoted from public display to winter duty. Whatever its history, tonight it works. It makes the wall slower. It gives the chamber a padded silence. It lets the bed hold its heat a little longer. A servant's hand reaches through the outer opening of the curtains and pulls one fold closer to the post. The movement is practiced, not intimate. Cloth slides against cloth. The last narrow gap darkens. The bed becomes more fully its own enclosure, a room made from wool, linen, wood, and breath. Beyond it, hangings stand against the walls like quiet guards who cannot win the war, but can delay the cold long enough for sleeping bodies to manage. The chamber shrinks by layers, stone to tapestry, room to screen, bed to curtain, blanket to skin, each barrier taking a little from winter and leaving the rest for someone else to answer. Below the guarded warmth of the bed, the floor keeps its own population. Rush stems lie flattened where feet have crossed before sleep. Some are fresh enough to crackle faintly when pressed. Others bend without sound, worn smooth by shoes, chair legs, servants' knees, and the small traffic of a chamber that is never entirely private. The rushes make the floor less cruel, but they do not make it clean in the modern sense, or warm in the way your sleepy feet might wish. They are a managed compromise spread over boards or stone, and winter is very good at finding the limits of compromise. A servant on the pallet has pulled the blanket close under the chin. The pallet is not far from the bed, but distance in this room is measured by rank and temperature, not only by steps. A few feet lower and nearer the draught can change a night. The pallet may be a simple straw mattress laid on the floor, a low frame, or a bundle that can be moved by day. It has none of the bed's proud enclosure. No heavy curtain closes around it. No high posts declare ownership. It receives the cold more directly and asks the sleeper to make up the difference with clothing, posture, and a talent for not resenting furniture. The rushes beneath the pallet help by raising the body slightly from the bare surface and softening the cold that rises from stone or seeps through boards. In many medieval households, floors were strewn with rushes, straw, reeds, or other plant material, sometimes refreshed for important occasions, festivals, or when the old layer had become too foul to defend. In castles, the quality of floor covering varied by space. A lordly chamber might have better mats, carpets, or textiles in places. Service rooms might rely on humbler layers, the floor records hierarchy, without needing to speak. The smell is different down there. Inside the bed curtains, the air is wool, linen, and breath. Near the floor, it is rush, dust, old leather, and cold draught moving under the doorcloth. If herbs have been mixed into the strewing, a crushed sweetness may rise when someone turns. Sweet flag, lavender, mint, meadowsweet, or other aromatic plants appear in references to strewing herbs in later medieval and early modern households, though use varies. The pleasant smell has practical company. It can freshen a room, discourage some pests, or at least suggest that someone is trying. Trying counts for something, especially when the alternative is admitting defeat to a floor. The evidence remains frustratingly divided over how often floor rushes were fully removed, rather than merely covered, renewed, or swept in different places and periods. Some commentators complain about filthy accumulations, but complaints often choose the worst cases because they are trying to make a point. Household accounts can show purchases of rushes or payments for strewing, yet not the exact state of the old layer under a sleepy servant's cheek. The truth is likely uneven. Good management produces one kind of floor. Neglect produces another. Winter, dogs, wet boots, spilled ale and tired staff all have opinions. A quiet scratch comes from somewhere near the wall. It may be the building settling. It may be a mouse. In a castle, stored grain, rushes, straw bedding, scraps from meals and warm corners all attract small lives. Pests are not a theatrical horror. They are an ordinary inconvenience with whiskers. The household fights them with cats, traps, sealed containers, sweeping and resignation. Straw mattresses and floor coverings can harbour fleas, lice, mites, or other unpleasant guests, especially when cleaning is poor. Even a well-kept chamber is not sealed against the tiny opportunists of winter. The pallet sleeper turns again. The blanket pulls up, leaving a heel exposed for one cold second. The foot vanishes back under cloth. This is how lower status sleep survives, by quick corrections. A servant may sleep in a woolen gown or cloak, shoes near the hand, belt and tools laid aside, body curled to conserve heat. There is little room for graceful arrangement. The floor gives shape to the body, hips find the flatter places, shoulders avoid knots in the straw. A knee discovers a hard stem and remembers it all night. A small wooden headrest or rolled bundle may lift the head. A proper pillow is not guaranteed below the bed. Folded clothing does the work. That clothing is too valuable to be tossed carelessly away, so it becomes cushion, draft blocker, extra cover, or a guarded lump under the cheek. A sleeve stuffed with spare cloth can become almost comfortable if fatigue is strong enough. This is one of history's quieter skills, teaching the body to accept almost as a perfectly respectable category. In the corner, a rolled mat leans against a chest. It might be used for another sleeper, or for kneeling, or for insulating a place near the wall. Mats of rush, straw, reeds, or similar materials can be woven or bundled, and they turn portable plant matter into a thin argument against cold floors. They are not luxurious, but they can be the difference between sleeping and merely lying down while your bones conduct a survey of the stone. The mat's edge has frayed. A servant has tied it with a bit of cord, because even poor insulation deserves repair before replacement becomes possible. A quirky habit belongs to the floor as much as to the bed. People may tuck feet into straw, spare cloth, or even the edge of another person's bedding if the social arrangement allows it. Not elegantly, not with ceremony, just the small, creeping foot diplomacy of a cold night. In crowded sleeping spaces, warmth leaks across boundaries. A child on a pallet may press against a nurse. A page may curl back to back with another boy. A guard may sleep with cloak hems overlapping. No one calls this a system. It is more like a series of negotiated truces conducted by knees. The rushes also change sound. A bare floor would betray every step with sharper taps and scrapes. Rushes muffle movement, which is useful in a room where sleepers are ranked, and some must remain lightly alert. A servant rising to tend the fire can cross with less disturbance. A maid bringing a vessel can move without waking the entire household. But the same softness hides hazards. A dropped pin, a small key, a bead from a rosary, a crumb of hot coal carried too far from the hearth. All can disappear into the floor's pale tangle. The rushes are comfort and concealment at once. Near the hearth, the floor covering thins. No one sensible lets dry rushes crowd too close to embers. A cleared strip of stone surrounds the fire, swept more carefully than the colder corners. That bare patch is safer, but harsher underfoot. In the half-dark, the boundary matters. Step on rushes, and the foot is muffled. Step on stone, and cold climbs through the stocking. Step too near the hearth, and ash clings to the sole. Every surface gives instructions. You obey because the room has more experience than you do. The person on the pallet breathes through the nose now, slow but not deep. Floor sleep is lighter. A draught under the door can wake the ankle. A coal shifting in the hearth can call a servant upward before thought has fully formed. The noble body inside the bed may sink toward fuller sleep, protected by curtains, status, and someone else's readiness. The floor body remains nearer the castle's demands. It is not only colder, it is more interruptible. Inside your own enclosed warmth, the knowledge of the floor does not vanish. You can hear it in the rushes when someone shifts. You can smell it when air moves under the curtain. The bed's comfort is partly made from the fact that someone else lies lower, nearer the draught, nearer the work. Medieval winter sleep is not one experience shared equally by all who shelter behind the same walls. It is a layered arrangement, from mattress to pallet to rushes to stone, each layer carrying a different share of the night. The fire settles again, and the floor answers with a tiny dry whisper, perhaps a stem cooling, perhaps a foot moving in sleep. The pallet blanket rises and falls. The rushes hold the day's crushed green smell under the heavier odours of wool and ash. A mouse, if it was a mouse, keeps its counsel behind the chest. The chamber remains divided by height, the curtained bed above, the pallet below, the floor beneath that, and under everything the stone of the castle, storing cold with a patience no blanket can quite match. The stone under everything keeps its patience, but people have never been content to let stone have the last word. Somewhere near the hearth, a servant lifts a small covered pan with both hands, careful with the handle, careful with the ash, careful with the sleepy irritation of everyone who would rather not be reminded that heat must be carried around like a favour. The pan is not for cooking now, it is for the bed. A bed warmer is a simple thing with serious responsibilities. In later medieval and early modern households, warming pans made of metal, often brass or copper, are filled with hot coals or embers, closed, and moved between sheets to take the first cruelty out of the linen. The idea is easy to understand, the moment cold cloth touches your ankle. Before a body can heat the bed can punish the body. So the household sends a small advance party of warmth into the sheet and hopes nobody is careless enough to scorch the linen or drop a coal where it can cause trouble. The pan does not glide through the bed like a modern appliance. It must be handled. The lid must sit properly. Any pierced pattern in the metal lets heat breathe, but also reminds everyone that fire has not become tame just because it has a handle. The servant slides it under the upper cover and moves it slowly, not leaving it too long in one place. Linen can brown, straw can smoulder, feathers can take damage. A warming pan is comfort with teeth. It is very good at making the bed kinder and just good enough at making disaster plausible. Inside the curtains, the warmth arrives first as a smell: hot metal, faint ash, and the dry edge of heated linen. Then the sheet near your feet loses its sharpness. Not fully, nothing so generous, but the worst bite goes out of it. Your toes, which have been behaving like separate, resentful creatures, begin to accept the possibility of staying attached until morning. You keep still while the pan moves. The servant knows the route by habit: foot of the bed, lower middle. A careful sweep to one side, back again. No lingering near the straw seam. There are other methods, humbler and often safer. A heated stone wrapped in cloth can be tucked near the feet. A brick warmed by the hearth can serve the same purpose if handled carefully. In some households, a bottle or vessel of warm water may be used in later periods, but in a medieval castle, heated stones, tiles, bricks and pans are easier to imagine from the materials at hand. The principle is older than the object. Heat something that holds warmth. Wrap it so it does not burn skin or cloth, and let it spend itself slowly under the covers. A quirky little detail comes with the stone. It is often chosen not for beauty, but for behaviour. A stone that cracks when heated is useless and possibly dramatic in the worst way. A smooth river stone may feel pleasant, but can split if dampness hides inside. A tile or brick near the hearth may be more dependable. The wrapped bundle becomes a private sun for the feet, though a small and fading one. If it is too hot, it must be nudged away. If too cool, it becomes just another object in the bed, and an oddly accusatory one. Academic opinion still shifts around the problem of how widely metal warming pans were used in medieval bedrooms, as opposed to becoming more clearly documented in later household practice. The logic of bed warming is ancient and obvious, and heated stones or bricks are plausible across many cold households. But surviving objects and clear references cluster unevenly by date, region, and wealth. So the pan in a high-status chamber can be historically reasonable, especially toward the later Middle Ages and in wealthy contexts, while the wrapped stone remains the more modest cousin, doing quiet work without leaving much evidence for museums. The servant withdraws the pan after a final pass. It must not stay. That is the rule that matters. The bed wants warmth, not a sleeping coal. The pan returns to the hearth area, where it can be emptied, watched, or set aside. A careless person with a warmer can ruin a sheet, smoke a mattress, or wake the household with the kind of excitement nobody appreciates after midnight. The medieval world has many dangers, but few are as embarrassing as being defeated by your own attempt at comfort. Now the wrapped stone comes in, smaller and less grand. It is passed through the curtain and placed near the lower bedding. You feel its presence before it touches you, a dull glow under cloth. Your feet move toward it with no dignity at all. The other sleeper's foot arrives there too, and for a moment there is a silent negotiation. The stone belongs to neither of you morally, but to whoever can keep contact without making the other person complain. This is the sort of legal question no royal court should have to settle. The stone's heat is uneven. One side is warmer. The cloth around it is thick enough to protect the skin, but thin enough to let warmth through. You press the soles near it, not directly on it, then pull back slightly. Too much heat feels almost painful after so much cold. The body distrusts sudden kindness. Then the warmth begins to spread through the stocking, up through the toes, into the arch of the foot. The relief is quiet and disproportionate. A small heated object can change the whole mood of a bed. Near the pallet, the servant may not have such a stone, or perhaps another one, less warm, is pushed toward the feet under a poorer blanket. Heat follows rank, even in portable form. The best pan, the hottest stone, the thickest wrapping, the servant's attention, these move first toward the main bed. Still, lesser comforts circulate where they can. A kitchen brick warmed after the day's work, a cloth bag of heated grain in some later traditions, a cloak laid over feet. A dog allowed near a low sleeper for warmth if the household tolerates it. Comfort is official in the chamber and improvised near the floor. The stone also changes sleep's rhythm. At first it keeps you aware of your feet. You measure its fading by the inch. Very warm. Warm. Less warm. Still better than nothing. Your knees relax as the feet stop sending urgent reports upward. The shoulders follow. The hand tucked into your sleeve loosens. A bed is often warmed in zones, and the feet are the stubborn frontier. Once they begin to yield, the rest of the body believes the night may be survivable. The main historical fact under this small comfort is that medieval heating is local, not general. The hearth warms a patch of room. The curtains warm a pocket of air. Clothing warms the skin. A warming pan or hot stone warms a particular part of the bed. Survival depends on stacking little zones of heat until they overlap enough. Nobody expects the whole castle to become warm. That would be unreasonable, expensive, and suspiciously close to magic. The rat stone now sits between 4 feet, politely contested. The other sleeper shifts, and the stone rolls a finger's width. Both of you follow it, a slow, sleepy migration beneath the blanket. The movement opens a seam near the lower cover, and cold slips in. You stop at once. The bed teaches restraint again. Warmth is won and lost by inches. Outside the curtains, the servant settles the empty pan near the hearth and checks that no coal has escaped. The fire gives him almost no flame now, only a steady eye under ash. The chamber's walls remain cold. The rushes lie quiet. The pallet sleeper breathes lightly. Under the covers, the stone continues its small duty. Not heroic, not symbolic, just hot enough to keep the feet from ruling the mind. Its heat will fade before morning, of course. Everything does. But for now the bed holds a new centre, low and wrapped in cloth, and the sleepers shape themselves around it without opening their eyes. The rat stone keeps fading, and as it fades, the castle asks for other bodies. Not the comfortable ones, buried deep in the bed if rank can prevent it, but the bodies placed along the colder edges of the household. Guards, porters, pages, fire tenders, grooms, kitchen servants, and the half-sleeping people whose work begins whenever someone else's comfort breaks. Beyond the curtains, beyond the chamber, the night has not settled into rest. It has divided itself into watches. A castle at night remains staffed because gates do not guard themselves, and fires do not make wise decisions alone. The porter at the gatehouse, the watchman on duty, the servant assigned to answer a call, the groom checking a restless horse, all live inside a pattern of interrupted sleep. In many medieval households, especially great aristocratic ones, service is continuous. The lord may sleep, but the household does not become empty. A fortress is a residence, a workplace, a storehouse, and a guarded centre of power. Even in winter, especially in winter, someone is listening. The guard's sleeping place is not the curtained bed. It may be a bench, a rough pallet, a corner near a brazier, a cloak on boards in a guard room, or simply the place duty allows between rounds. The air there is sharper, the walls may be bare, the door opens more often. Weapons, cloaks, boots and damp leather claim the space before comfort does. A man coming off watch may lie down still partly dressed, because removing too much clothing is a promise the next horn or knock may immediately embarrass. Outside, the wall walk is brutal in a different way from the bedchamber. There is no pretending the air is merely chilly. Subzero cold bites exposed skin, stiffens fingers, and turns metal fittings into small punishments. A guard's hand on an iron latch learns caution quickly. Wool mittens or wrapped cloth help. but hands need freedom for keys, bolts, spear shafts, lanterns, and the 1,000 awkward tasks that night invents. Breath wets the edge of a scarf or hood, then cools. A beard, if worn, can gather frost at the mouth. This is not picturesque when it is happening to your own face. The mainstream fact here is simple. Medieval castles used watch systems, gate controls, and night security routines because a household's safety depended on controlled access. Gates were closed, keys managed, guards posted, and movement after dark watched more closely than during the day. Not every castle is under siege. Most nights are ordinary. But ordinary does not mean careless. Theft, fire, wandering animals, drunken retainers, messengers, late arrivals, and plain human error all have a talent for appearing at bad hours. A guard may carry a lantern with horn panes rather than glass, the light clouded and yellow, the flame protected from wind but never fully safe from it. Horn lanterns are one of those lovely practical objects that feel clever until you have to rely on one in freezing weather. The scraped horn lets through enough light to avoid a stair edge or find a latch, but not enough to make the passage friendly. The lantern smells faintly of warm horn, oil, smoke, and cold metal. Its handle numbs the fingers if held too long. Experts remain cautious about claiming whether every castle maintained formal watches in the same way across regions and centuries, because documents vary and the size of households differs greatly. Royal fortresses, border castles, urban residences, small private castles, and wartime garrisons do not all sleep under one rule. Some records give wages to watchmen or porters. Ordinances describe household order. Legal and military sources reveal expectations. But the exact rhythm of one winter night depends on place, threat, money, and how nervous the person in command happens to be. A porter in the gatehouse has his own cold bargain. The gatehouse may be thick-walled and enclosed, but it is close to the most exposed part of the castle's life, the entrance. The portcullis, doors, bolts, wicket gate and drawbar all need managing. If a late messenger arrives, the porter may be roused from a bench or a low bed, grumbling into his cloak. He cannot simply open because someone knocks. Names matter, seals matter, voices matter. In bad weather, mercy and suspicion wrestle at the door, and suspicion usually has the better job description. A strange little night custom belongs to the keys. Important keys may be kept by trusted officers, hung on a belt, placed near the bed of a porter or steward, or delivered according to household routine. The key itself can be large, cold, and heavy enough to announce its importance against the hip. Sleeping with keys close is not comfortable, but neither is losing them. A ring of keys under a pillow is a terrible pillow. A ring of keys across the room is a terrible idea. So the keeper of keys learns his own compromise, and turns in sleep without letting the iron bite too hard. The watchman's sleep, when he gets it, is shallow. Boots may stay on or lie within arm's reach. A cloak doubles as blanket. A spear or staff leans where a sleepy hand can find it. In a room with several men, warmth improves slightly, but rest becomes noisier. Coughs, mutters, a whetstone left in the wrong place, someone's damp cloak steaming faintly near a brazier. If there is a brazier, it must be watched. Charcoal gives good heat, but fumes in a poorly ventilated space can be dangerous. Medieval people may not explain that danger in modern chemical terms, but they know bad air and smoke can sicken or kill. They are not fools. They are people working with imperfect rooms. The brazier glows red in a guardroom, if one has been allowed. It warms shins and hands better than backs. Everyone turns toward it in pieces. One man heats his palms, then steps aside. Another lowers a boot sole near the heat, too close for a moment, and pulls it back before leather suffers. Wet wool gives off a sour, sheepish smell. A cloak hung too near the coals may singe at the edge. No one wants to explain that in the morning. The castle was saved, but my cloak tried to become smoke is not a strong defence. Back near the chamber, a servant may be sleeping lightly because the fire might need attention before dawn. This person lives between worlds, not exposed like the wall guard, not protected like the bed's occupants. A page might lie near a doorway, ready to carry messages, fetch a drink, or wake a higher servant. The body learns to wake at the right sound. Not every noise matters. The fire shifting is one thing. A superior's voice is another. A distant gate knock is another thing entirely. Sleep becomes sorted by importance. The cold sharpens hierarchy. Those who can stay within enclosed layers do so. Those whose jobs pull them outward carry the household's exposure on their hands and cheeks. Yet there is pride in this work too, not merely suffering. A porter who knows every bolt in darkness. A watchman who can tell weather from threat by the kind of sound at the gate. A groom who hears one horse stamp wrong in the stable. These people hold knowledge that warm sleepers depend on. Their comfort is limited, but their competence is not. A sound travels through the passage. Not a shout, more like a muffled footstep and then the brief scrape of wood. Inside the bed, nobody moves at first. The shared warmth holds. The stone at the feet has cooled to a dull memory. Outside the curtain, the pallet sleeper wakes enough to listen. The chamber waits. The sound does not repeat. Perhaps a guard changing place. Perhaps a servant settling by the hearth. Perhaps only timber shrinking in the cold. The body on the pallet remains alert a moment longer than the bodies in the bed, because duty sleeps closer to the floor. Beyond the room, the castle continues in fragments of wakefulness. A lantern turning at the stair, a key lifted from a hook, a cloak pulled tighter under the chin, a guard breathing into wool before stepping back toward the wall. The night is not one blanket laid over everyone equally. It is a set of small stations, some warm, some bitter, some watched, some dreaming. Inside the bed, your feet move once toward the cooled stone, find little comfort left, and stay there anyway, while another faint sound travels through the doorcloth and disappears into the rushes. The faint sound in the rushes leaves no answer, and your body returns to the smaller problem it can understand. The cooled stone, the slow breath beside you, the weight of wool, and the dull warmth held under the ribs from the evening meal. That warmth is not imagination. It matters. A cold night is faced not only with cloth, fire and walls, but with the body's own furnace, fed earlier by bowls, cups, bread, fat, and whatever the household could spare without looking wasteful. Earlier, before the chamber narrowed into curtains and ash, supper had done part of the work. In a castle household, eating is not simply private appetite, it is order. The great hall may arrange people by rank, with the highest seated apart or above, the lower members of the household served according to position, and servants moving food through a practiced confusion of trenchers, bowls, knives, cups, and commands. By winter, hot food has more than social value. Pottage, stewed meat, broth, ale and bread bring heat into the hands first, then the mouth, then the belly. A wooden bowl can warm the fingers before the food does. Your last meal still sits in you with quiet importance. Perhaps there was a thick pottage of peas or beans, onions if available, herbs if the kitchen had them, and some fat worked into it because fat is valuable fuel for the body. Perhaps bread, darker than fine white loaves, helped carry it. In a wealthier household, meat may appear more often than among poorer villagers, though fasting days and church rules shape the table. Medieval Christian calendars include many fast days when meat, and sometimes animal products, depending on local custom and period, are restricted. Even castle stomachs must negotiate with the church. Tonight, if it is not a fast day, a little meat broth or fatty stew has done a kindness the blankets cannot do alone. The body burns food to produce heat. People in the past do not describe metabolism in modern terms, but they understand perfectly well that a person facing cold on an empty stomach is in worse trouble. A hungry body curls tighter, wakes more often, and feels the cold as accusation. A fed body is not invincible. It is simply less easily defeated. A cup before bed may hold ale, small beer, wine in higher households, or warmed drink if someone has gone to the trouble. Ale is safer than suspect water in many contexts, though not all water is bad and not all ale is strong. Weak ale can be an everyday drink, nourishing and familiar, not a nightly collapse into drunkenness. In winter, a warm drink is especially welcome. Spiced wine or warmed ale may appear in better households, with cinnamon, cloves, ginger, long pepper, grains of paradise, or other imported spices when wealth allows. Those spices travel far before reaching a cup in a cold chamber. Your sleepy throat receives the end of a trade route. The smell of spice can linger in the mouth after the cup is gone. Ginger's heat is not the same as fire heat, but it persuades the tongue. Medieval medical ideas often think in terms of hot, cold, wet and dry qualities, inherited from ancient humoral theory, and foods are chosen or explained within that framework by learned physicians and household practice alike. A warming spice in winter makes sense to that way of thinking. Whether it truly protects you from freezing is another matter. It certainly makes cold ale taste less like surrender. Interpretations continue to differ over whether ordinary people experienced spiced winter drinks mainly as medical balancing, festive luxury, household habit, or elite display. Recipes, medical texts, account books, and literary references give overlapping clues, but they do not always tell how a tired servant, a minor noble, or a kitchen boy understood the cup in hand. For some, it may be medicine, for others, comfort, for others, proof that the household can afford foreign sweetness while the wind tries to get under the door. The same drink can warm the body and advertise the purse. A lesser-known kitchen trick belongs to the timing of food. The last hot dish matters if the sleeping spaces are cold. A bowl served too early leaves the body cooling before bed. A small late serving, a cup of warmed ale, or a piece of bread dipped in broth can change how the first hour under covers feels. This does not mean every castle household sends bedtime snacks like a considerate innkeeper. Rank decides who receives such attention. But kitchens understand rhythm. Bread left near the fire, broth kept from cooling too quickly, a cup warmed rather than served cold. Small choices become part of winter management. The kitchen itself is far warmer than the chamber in one sense, and far less comfortable in another. There, heat roars and punishes. Ovens, cauldrons, spits, steam and smoke work the air until faces redden while backs remain cold near the door. Kitchen servants may sweat during work and then chill dangerously when they step into passages. Damp clothing after labour is a quiet enemy. A cook's helper carrying a covered dish across a courtyard or along a passage loses heat from both the food and their own hands. By the time the bowl reaches the right table, everyone has contributed a little warmth to the household's hierarchy. Salted meats, smoked fish, dried peas, stored grains, hard cheeses, apples kept in straw, nuts and preserved foods all belong to winter's food world. Fresh abundance is seasonal. Castle stores are carefully managed, especially during hard weather. A castle may hold larders, granaries, cellars, dairies and buttery spaces, each with its own temperature and smell. The household survives winter because food has been gathered, salted, dried, brewed, counted, and locked away long before this night. Your warm belly is the final, private stage of a public system of fields, rents, carts, mills, ovens, and servants' backs. Drink also changes sleep in less noble ways. Too much before bed creates a problem nobody wants to solve in a freezing chamber. The chamber pot near the bed is practical, and its presence reminds you that warmth, modesty, and bodily need do not always cooperate. Leaving the bed means losing heat. Calling a servant means exposing status to necessity. Holding on too long means lying awake, increasingly resentful of ale as a concept. Medieval comfort is full of these little traps. The warm cup that helped you sleep may later require negotiations with cold air and pride. The meal's fat and grain continue their slow work under your ribs. The bed now smells faintly of cooled stone, wool, skin, and the ghost of spice on breath. The other sleeper exhales, and the shared air inside the curtains grows warmer, heavier. Your stomach gives one quiet shift. Not hunger, not fullness, just the body sorting what it has been given and deciding, for now, to keep making heat. Beyond the chamber, the kitchen fires may be banked or still active for early work. Bread dough brewing, boiling water, feeding staff preparing for dawn. Large households do not wait until everyone is cheerful. In the colder sleeping places, a servant who ate thinner pottage or drank only weak ale may feel the night more sharply. A guard who missed hot food because of duty carries that absence into his hands. Food is not only nourishment. In winter, it is another layer, but one distributed by rank, timing, rule, and luck. A small taste of salt remains at the corner of your mouth. You press your lips together and do not reach for the cup in the wall niche. It will be cold now, and drinking it would invite new trouble. The wiser choice is stillness. The body has enough to do. Under the blankets, heat from the meal, heat from the other sleeper, heat stored briefly in cloth and mattress, and the last mild memory of the warmed stone overlap in the dark. None of it is strong alone. Together, for this hour, it is enough to keep the cold from becoming the only thing you know. The taste of salt fades, and the room becomes less about the belly and more about the dark that gathers behind closed eyes. Not complete darkness. The hearth still holds a low red under ash. The candle has been pinched out or burned down to a small, guarded stub. A trace of light leaks through the bed curtain where the fold does not quite meet the post. It is enough to turn cloth into shadow, not enough to make the chamber friendly. Night in a castle is not silent. It is listening, arranged in layers. The person on the pallet listens for the bed. The servant near the hearth listens for the fire. The porter listens for the gate. The guard listens for whatever the wind might be pretending to be. Inside the bed, you listen less bravely. A board creaks. Rushes settle. Somewhere in the wall, a tiny scrape repeats once and stops. The mind, which had been sleepy a moment ago, offers several explanations, most of them unhelpful. Faith lives close to sleep here. Before lying down, someone may have crossed themselves, murmured a prayer, touched a rosary, or asked protection from a saint whose patience must be impressive by now. Medieval Christianity shapes the calendar, the table, the household's moral order, and the habits around waking and sleeping. Prayers before bed are not decorative. They answer a real sense of vulnerability. Night is when fires fail, illness worsens, thieves move, babies cry, and dreams arrive without asking permission from theology. A string of prayer beads may hang near the bed, lie under a pillow, or sit on a small chest within reach. The beads are smooth from fingers. They may be bone, wood, jet, amber, coral, glass, or other materials according to wealth and local access. A noble set can be beautiful, but beauty is not the only point. The hand knows the beads in the dark. One bead, one prayer. Another bead, another breath. The repetition gives the mind a narrow path to walk when the room feels too large and the cold too awake. The mainstream fact is clear enough. Medieval people in Western Europe lived within a deeply Christian culture, and religious practice entered ordinary domestic life through prayers, feast days, fasts, blessings, images, relics, candles, and household devotion. This does not mean every person felt the same belief in the same way. People are not identical just because a church bell reaches them all. But the framework is there, close as the linen at your neck. At bedtime, faith is not only doctrine, it is something done with hands. A small devotional image may be painted on a panel, stitched into cloth, or placed near the chamber if the household is wealthy enough. In plainer sleeping spaces, a remembered prayer may be the whole chapel a person can carry. The castle chapel itself may not be far away, yet at this hour its altar is separated from you by stone passages, cold air, and rank. The private bed becomes a smaller place of appeal. You do not need a choir to be anxious in the dark. You only need a shutter to rattle at the wrong moment. A quirky winter habit belongs to blessed objects and protective words. Some households keep charms, written prayers, pilgrim badges, small crosses, or blessed candles associated with protection from storm, illness, or sudden death. Church authorities might approve some devotions and condemn others, but daily practice can be untidy. A line of Latin copied onto parchment, a saint's name spoken before sleep, a candle saved from a holy day, a medal brought from a shrine. These things can lie very close to ordinary fear. A person may not draw a neat border between medicine, prayer, habit, and hope at 2 a.m. Modern scholarship still has not quite resolved whether certain household charms should be understood as superstition outside official religion, lay devotion within it, practical protective habit, or a mixture that changes from case to case. The written sources often come from clergy who disapprove, courts that prosecute, or collectors who record the unusual because it is unusual. Ordinary practice is harder to hear. A charm tucked beside a bed does not explain itself. It simply stays there while the sleeper tries to make it to dawn. The dark also changes the shape of the room. The chamber that seemed manageable by candlelight becomes a collection of uncertain masses. The chest near the wall, the stool, the hanging with its woven animal, the fire iron set carefully down. Each thing is known, yet each can become unfamiliar when half seen. The bed curtain is meant to protect you from the room, but it also makes the room into something imagined. Sounds arrive without bodies attached. A cough beyond the fabric seems closer than it is. A footstep in the passage seems to pause outside the door longer than it does. Dreams matter too. Medieval dream interpretation has learned traditions, biblical examples, folk habits, and plenty of caution. Some dreams may be treated as messages, temptations, warnings, nonsense from digestion, or signs of bodily imbalance. A bad dream after cold pottage in a smoky chamber may not receive the same explanation from a monk, a physician, a grandmother, and the person who just woke up sweating under wool. The body supplies images. Culture gives them possible meanings. Sleep is not empty. It is crowded with whatever the waking world has left behind. You lie still because movement lets cold into the bed. Stillness also gives thoughts too much room. The prayer beads are beyond your reach unless you open the blanket near the wrist, so you settle for a whispered line already known by heart. The words are quiet enough not to wake the other sleeper. Their shape matters as much as their meaning. Familiar words can be a blanket for the mind, not warm exactly, but orderly. The tongue moves once behind closed lips. The breath slows. Outside the curtain, the pallet sleeper murmurs in sleep. It could be prayer. It could be complaint. It could be nothing with grammar. In the Middle Ages, sleep may be broken into phases more often than modern electric life encourages. People wake in the night to tend fires, pray, urinate, nurse children, check animals, or simply lie awake for a while. Some historians have argued for patterns of first and second sleep in pre-industrial Europe, though evidence varies by period and region. In a winter castle, segmented sleep needs no theory to seem plausible. The room itself keeps interrupting. Candles introduce their own caution. Flame near beds and hangings is dangerous, but darkness invites fear and practical difficulty. A rushlight, taper, or candle stub may be kept for necessary waking, used sparingly because light costs money and fire has opinions. The smell after a candle is snuffed, hangs briefly in the chamber, sharp and greasy if tallow, cleaner if wax. That smell can mark the border between the speaking part of night and the listening part. The cold presses closer as the fire lowers. Not enough to defeat the bed, not yet. Enough to sharpen the skin around the nose and cheek. You pull the cover slightly higher, leaving a small tunnel for breath so the linen does not grow too damp. The other sleeper's breathing is steady now. The shared warmth continues its dull work. Under the pillow or near the chest, a small object of devotion waits without needing to be looked at. Somewhere in the passage, wood taps stone. A guard perhaps. A servant perhaps. The sound moves away. The mind offers one last unnecessary picture of the stairwell, the gate, the black yard, the snow with its hard crust, the chapel roof holding frost. Then the prayer line repeats inside you more slowly, no longer fully spoken. The bed curtain holds the dark close. The room remains cold, watched, believed in, and half heard, while sleep approaches not as a soft cloud, but as a cautious visitor feeling for the latch. The cautious visitor does not come equally to everyone. Sleep moves more easily toward the warmest bodies, the best-fed bodies, the bodies old enough to regulate themselves and young enough not to ache at every draught. In the same chamber, under the same roof, winter measures people differently. The bed may hold its pocket of heat, but the sick, the very young, the old, the pregnant, and the exhausted all meet the cold with smaller reserves. A child turns somewhere beyond the curtain, or perhaps only in the memory of the room. Children are often tucked close because small bodies lose heat quickly, and because a restless child can turn one blanket into a battlefield by dawn. An infant may sleep near a mother, nurse, or attendant, wrapped in cloths and watched more carefully in bitter weather. Swaddling, cradles, shared bedding, and close nursing all belong to the wider world of medieval childcare, though practice varies by place, class, and advice giver. The cold does not care for advice. It goes first to the smallest fingers. If a baby sleeps in the chamber, the night becomes more fragile. The fire cannot be allowed to fail too completely. Wet cloths must be changed, which means exposing skin to air that has been waiting all night for such an opportunity. A nurse rising from a pallet carries the child near her body for warmth, one hand holding the bundle, the other fumbling for a cloth, a cup, a cover, a safer angle by the hearth. The whole room may remain half asleep around that small need. Nobody calls it inconvenience aloud if they are wise. Babies have powerful allies in the hierarchy of being impossible to ignore. The mainstream fact is plain and difficult. Medieval infant and child mortality was high by modern standards, and winter added pressure through cold, poor nutrition, respiratory illness, and the limits of medical care. That does not mean medieval parents loved their children less, or that loss was taken lightly. The surviving letters, prayers, wills, medical writings, and devotional habits show concern, grief, and constant management. A warm place near an adult body is not sentimental decoration. It is practical care inside a world with little margin. An older person in the chamber faces another kind of night. Knees stiffen before dawn, fingers ache, teeth may be few, digestion unreliable, sleep easily broken. The elderly body does not leap from bed to dress beside the hearth. It negotiates every movement. If a grandmother, dowager, senior servant, or aging retainer sleeps in a castle household, warmth may depend on status. A noble widow may have a better chamber, thicker bedding, and servants to bring warmed cloths. An old servant may have a corner, a pallet, and the memory of stronger joints. Age is universal. Comfort is not. The sick bed may be close to the fire, but not too close. Heat is medicine until it becomes danger. Medieval medicine, shaped by humoral ideas, often treats illness through balance, warmth and cold, wetness and dryness, diet, rest, bleeding or purging in some cases, herbs, prayers, and regimen. A feverish person may be kept warm, cooled, fed lightly, given broth, watched for sweat, and surrounded by instructions that make sense within the medical knowledge of the time. Some care helps. Some care does not. Much depends on the illness, the caregiver, and luck, which is a terrible physician but a common one. A basin sits somewhere near the bed or hearth. Water in it is cold now unless recently warmed. A cloth used for wiping a face or hands stiffens at the edge when left too near a draught. Vinegar may be used in sick rooms for cleaning, smell, or as part of medical practice. Herbs might be laid nearby: rosemary, sage, rue, lavender, depending on region, season, and household stores. The smell of a sick room is not only unpleasant, it is layered with attempts to help. Warmed broth, damp linen, smoke, vinegar, stale sweat, crushed leaves, and the anxious tidiness of people trying to impose order on a body that will not obey. A quirky little object sometimes appears in medieval care: the posset cup or small feeding vessel in later forms, or simply a narrow cup and spoon used to coax warm, thickened drink into someone too weak to sit well. The drink might be milk curdled with ale or wine in later recipes, or another warm mixture suited to the household's habits. In a cold room, The challenge is not merely making nourishment, it is getting it into the person before it cools, spills, or turns the bedding into another problem. A spoonful can feel like a campaign when the patient's hands tremble. Archaeologists and historians do not entirely agree on whether some medieval skeletal evidence should be read as direct proof of cold stress, poor winter nutrition, chronic disease, hard labour, or a tangled mixture of all of them. Bones carry marks, but they do not narrate every night that made them. Written sources may describe famine, illness, remedies, or household expenses. They rarely say, "This person shivered for 3 hours because the pallet was too near the door." So scholars work carefully, reading bodies, buildings, and records together, while the lived cold remains partly beyond capture. A pregnant woman's winter sleep carries its own constraints. The body is warmer in some ways, more uncomfortable in others. Turning under heavy bedding takes effort. Rising in the night may be frequent. Tight garments must be loosened. The best position in the bed becomes more than preference. If she is high status, attendants may hover with cloths, warmed drink, extra covers, and the kind of advice that multiplies when a household has too many concerned women and not enough sleep. If she is a servant, work may have tired her before she ever reached the bedding. Childbirth itself belongs to a heated, enclosed, carefully managed space when possible, with women attending and men usually kept away unless medical or clerical presence is required. But even outside birth, pregnancy changes a winter night. The bladder objects, the back protests, the breath shortens under covers if the air grows too close. The curtain must hold warmth without trapping too much smoke or damp. There is no perfect arrangement. There is only adjustment, again and again, in small movements. For the exhausted worker, weakness may not be illness at all. It may be labour spent past its safe limit. A kitchen servant who has carried wood, water and cauldrons all day can fall asleep quickly and still wake cold because tiredness is not the same as warmth. A guard coming off the wall may shake for several minutes after lying down, not from fear, but from the body's attempt to recover heat. A laundress, groom, page or scullion has a body made vulnerable by wet sleeves, missed meals, smoke, and standing too long. Sleep repairs, but only if the cold allows it. Inside the better bed, your own body begins to register the room's uneven mercy. The shoulder under the blanket is warm, the nose is cold. The feet are better than before, though the stone has little left to give. Your stomach has settled, your hands are tucked and safe. It would be easy from this height to imagine the castle has solved the winter night. It has not. It has arranged risk by rank, age, health and usefulness. The strongest and best placed may sleep. The vulnerable are checked, wrapped, fed, shifted, prayed over, or simply endured beside until dawn gives more options. The pallet sleeper stirs again, perhaps because a child murmurs, perhaps because the fire sinks, perhaps because duty has entered the dream and pulled at one sleeve. The chamber holds its breath for a moment. No one fully wakes. Not yet. The sick, the old, the young and the worn out remain in their separate negotiations with the same cold air, while the wool above you grows heavier with stillness, and the room waits for the first task that cannot be postponed. The first task that cannot be postponed arrives before the room is ready to admit morning. It is not bright yet. The chamber has only changed texture. The darkness has thinned from black to a cold, uncertain grey behind the curtains, and the fire under ash has stopped pretending to be enough. Your body knows the hour before your eyes do. The nose is cold, the feet are disappointed. The shoulder nearest the curtain has cooled. Somewhere beyond the bed, a servant begins to move with the careful misery of someone leaving warmth on purpose. The pallet rustles. A blanket is folded back just enough to release a person from it, and the released air seems offended. The servant sits up slowly, because speed wastes heat and causes mistakes. The first breath is quiet, then sharper. The floor receives 2 stockinged feet, and the rushes answer with a dry scrape. Even through the mattress and bedding, you can hear the difference between a person shifting in sleep and a person accepting the day. This is the sound of obligation putting on its shoes. The hearth must be revived before anyone important rises fully. Banked embers are searched for under ash with an iron tool. If the night has gone well, there is still a red heart somewhere beneath the grey. If it has gone badly, the morning begins with tinder, flint, steel, breath, and frustration. In many medieval households, preserving embers overnight is a practical way to avoid relighting from scratch at dawn, especially when tinder may be damp and fingers stiff. Fire is not merely found. It is coaxed, protected, and sometimes begged. A servant bends close to the hearth, not too close, and stirs the ash. One ember answers, dull red, then brighter when air reaches it. A little dry kindling is set near it. The first thread of smoke rises before flame appears, and that smoke smells colder than last night's fire, as if even ash has slept badly. The servant blows gently. Too hard and the ash scatters, too little and the ember sulks. The flame catches at last, thin and nervous, then licks along a splinter. The chamber has not warmed, but hope has acquired a colour. Inside the bed, leaving the covers is still unthinkable. Medieval mornings in winter do not begin with cheerful stretching. They begin with calculations. Which garment is closest? Where are the shoes? Has the water frozen? Is the chamber pot reachable without exposing both legs to history? Will the person beside you move first and ruin the warm hollow you have made together? There is a small selfishness to cold that polite society rarely mentions. You become very interested in other people's duty. A basin sits near the wall, and the water in it has turned cruel. In a hard freeze, water left in an unheated chamber may develop a skin of ice, or at least become cold enough to hurt the hands. A servant may bring warmed water for higher-ranking members of the household, but that depends on rank, timing, and available labour. Washing is still part of life. Medieval people wash hands, faces, and bodies in ways shaped by class, season, facilities, and occasion. They do not all simply marinate in dirt because a modern joke requires it, but winter washing asks for courage and planning. The material record complicates the question of how often people in castles washed fully during severe winter weather, because moral writings, medical advice, household accounts, and archaeological evidence each illuminate different habits. We can see basins, ewers, towels, bath references, laundries, and bathing customs, but not every shivering decision made before dawn. A noble may have warm water brought. A servant may splash face and hands with whatever can be spared. A guard coming off the wall may choose immediate warmth over ideal cleanliness, and honestly, the guard has a case. The first piece of clothing to touch the body decides the mood of the morning. Linen warmed under the bedding is a blessing. Linen left over a chest near the wall is a crime committed by furniture. You reach carefully beneath the cover for a garment kept close through the night. It is not warm like fire, but it is not icy, and that distinction is everything. The cloth carries the bed's trapped heat for a few moments. Those moments must be used quickly. A sleeve is found. An arm enters. The fabric twists. You correct it without lifting the blanket higher than necessary. A curious practice, humble but effective, is keeping shoes, stockings, or a small garment under the edge of the bed or beneath a cover to keep them from freezing stiff or becoming painfully cold. Shoes near the hearth may dry, but too near and leather hardens, cracks, or scorches. Shoes near the bed remain safer but colder. Shoes under the bedding are warm, but not always clean enough for anyone with standards. Winter does not ask whether the choice is elegant, it asks whether you can walk. Outside the bed curtains, the servant's hands move briskly at the hearth now. The new flame grows around kindling. Larger wood is added with care. The room's warmer side begins to return, slowly, not generously. Heat first touches the hearthstones, then the air above them, then the face of anyone kneeling too close. Then perhaps the chamber after it has remembered how. The outer wall remains cold. The window remains a problem. The rushes near the door remain in the draft's service. Someone pulls open the bed curtain just enough to pass in a warmed item, perhaps a cloak, perhaps hose, perhaps a cloth that has spent a blessed minute near the fire. The sudden opening lets cold spill over the blanket. You take the thing quickly. The curtain falls. A faint smell of smoke comes with the warmth, and for once it is welcome. Smoke in clothing is not always unpleasant when the alternative is air that seems personally opposed to you. The other sleeper turns, reluctant now, because one body rising breaks the bed's shared climate. The hollow you made through the night collapses by degrees. Warmth leaks upward. The mattress, relieved of weight, lifts slightly. Cold finds the opening at the side. Morning is a thief with official permission. You hold the warmed cloth against your chest and let the body believe, briefly, that cooperation with the day may be possible. Beyond the chamber, the castle has begun its colder music. A door bar lifted, a pail set down, a horse stamping in the stable, a voice low in the passage. The guard from the wall may come in with a face reddened by cold, hands tucked beneath arms, and boots stiff at the ankle. Kitchen fires are being enlarged, water must be carried, bread must be cut or baked, ale must be drawn, ash must be moved. The household does not wake because the sun appears. It wakes because work has been waiting in the dark and has run out of patience. You sit up at last. The air touches the back of your neck below the cap and makes the shoulders rise. The bed, so carefully defended all night, loses its power the moment your body becomes vertical. A servant has placed a stool where your foot can find it. That kindness prevents contact with the worst of the floor. One foot, then the other. The rushes are cold but not bare stone. Shoes wait nearby, not warm but not frozen into insult. Your fingers work at a fastening with only partial obedience. The hearth grows brighter. The chamber does not thaw. It merely begins the day's long argument again. The basin waits. The cloak waits. The door waits with its draught tucked under it. Behind you, the bedclothes slump, still holding the print of bodies that would gladly return. But the castle is moving now, and the warmth that kept you alive in the dark must be remade in other forms. Clothing tightened, fire fed, food prepared, water warmed, orders answered, and the first cold step taken before anyone can pretend they are ready. The first cold step does not solve anything by itself, but it proves the night has been crossed. Your foot finds the stool, then the rushes, then the shoe. The leather is stiff at the heel, the fastening resists your fingers. A servant near the hearth adds another piece of wood, and the flame takes it with a crackle that feels almost rude after so many hours of guarded embers. The chamber is still cold, but it is no longer the same cold. It has work in it now. This is how people usually survive such nights. Not because castles are warm, and not because medieval bodies are made of tougher material, though they are certainly more accustomed to discomfort than yours may be. They survive because the household stacks defences. Stone keeps out enemies and wind in large ways. Shutters reduce the worst of the weather. Hangings slow the cold from the walls. Rushes soften the floor. Curtains make the bed into a smaller chamber. Wool holds air. Linen keeps skin cleaner. Caps cover heads. Stockings defend feet. Food feeds the body's inner heat. Servants tend fires. Bodies share warmth. No single measure is enough. The system works because many imperfect things overlap. The castle is therefore less a heated building than a winter machine operated by people. It needs fuel brought in before the storm. It needs dry wood, or at least wood dry enough to catch. It needs cloth repaired before holes become drafts. It needs bedding aired before damp settles into it. It needs shutters checked, ashes banked, children wrapped, elders placed away from the coldest wall, and servants awake enough to notice when comfort is failing. The building looks powerful from the outside. From inside, survival depends on maintenance. A mainstream fact sits plainly in the middle of it all. Medieval castle households were large, hierarchical communities, not just a lord and lady sitting romantically in a tower. A great household might include family members, officials, clerks, chaplains, guards, cooks, grooms, laundresses, pages, maids, craftsmen, and visiting retainers. Their labour turns stone into shelter. Without that labour, the castle remains impressive and deeply uncomfortable. A lord may own the chamber, but a servant knows which shutter leaks. The morning keeps revealing the night's arrangements. The bed curtains are opened wider, and cooler air enters the space that protected you. The bedclothes are pulled back, not carelessly. Bedding must be managed. Damp from breath and bodies should be aired when possible. Straw may need turning. Linen may need changing if the household can afford it. Blankets must be shaken, folded, guarded from sparks, and kept from the damp wall. Even warmth has an afterlife of chores. Last night's comfort becomes this morning's laundry, airing, beating, and repair. A small oddity appears when the bed is stripped back a little. Tucked near the lower edge, where feet had searched for heat, is a cloth bundle that once held the warmed stone. It has gone fully cold now, so cold it almost seems never to have helped at all. Someone picks it up and tests the cloth for soot marks or damp. If the stone is sound, it may be returned near the hearth for another night. If the cloth is singed, someone will hear about it. Household comfort leaves evidence in tiny failures: scorch rings, frayed cords, cracked tiles, torn mattress ticking, rushes dragged too close to the fire. The written sources leave room for disagreement about exactly how often people in different castles experienced what we would call sub-zero indoor temperatures. Weather varied sharply by region, elevation, season, and year, and indoor readings were not recorded with modern instruments. Accounts may note fuel, repairs, cloth, illness, or exceptional winters, while chronicles may mention rivers freezing or roads closing. Archaeology tells us where fireplaces, windows, shutters, and walls stood. But the precise temperature at the nose of a half-asleep servant on a pallet is gone. What remains is the pattern of adaptation. And the pattern is clear. People do not expect one grand solution. They rely on local heat. The hearth warms the hearthside. The bed warms the sleeper. The kitchen warms the cook and then chills the cook in the passage. The guardroom brazier warms hands, not backs. A shared blanket warms the middle, not the exposed edge. A cap saves the ears. A bowl of pottage helps the belly. A doorcloth saves the ankles. Medieval winter comfort is built in small jurisdictions, each with weak borders and constant disputes. You stand nearer the hearth now, cloak around your shoulders, while the room behind you shows its cold map. The wall hanging is slightly damp near the bottom. The window recess remains grey and mean. The rushes by the door lie flattened where the servant crossed early. The pallet blanket is folded poorly, because the person who used it was called away before finishing. The main bed looks grand again from a distance, but you know its secret. It is not grand because it is soft. It is grand because it can be defended. Outside the chamber, the household widens into motion. A boy carries kindling with reddened hands. A maid shakes out linen near a safer part of the room. A guard stamps feeling back into his feet and pretends not to enjoy the kitchen heat too much. Someone asks for warmed water. Someone else says there is not enough yet. The castle's hierarchy returns in voices. Who asks? Who waits? Who receives first? Who makes do? Winter does not erase rank. It makes rank visible in blankets, fuel, placement, and who must leave the bed earliest. Yet it would be false to imagine everyone merely suffering. There is skill here. There is pride in making a bad room usable. There is satisfaction in a fire revived from one ember. There is practical intelligence in how a curtain is tied, how a bed is placed, how a child is wrapped, how a cloak is dried without scorching it, how the last warm drink is timed, how a tired servant knows the difference between a harmless creak and a summons. Survival is not only endurance, it is competence repeated until it becomes ordinary. You take the cup from the niche and find it cold enough to make the teeth object. The taste is flat, metallic from the chill, and very awake. The sip is small. No one sensible drinks too much before another cold hour of work. The cup returns to the niche, where it will continue being unhelpful until someone fills it properly. Beside it, The candle stub waits for evening. The room is already preparing to need everything again. That is the quiet truth of the castle winter. Nobody defeats the cold once and for all. They delay it, divide it, trap it outside one layer and inside another, feed a fire before it dies, mend cloth before it fails, sleep close when sleeping alone would be foolish, and rise before the warmth has fully left the bed. They survive because they know the building's moods, because the household is organised around service and rank, because textiles are treasured, because fuel is counted, because bodies are practical, and because the same routine has been tested by many nights before this one. The flame grows stronger at last. Not enough to warm the whole chamber, enough to make the hearthstones begin again. Behind you, the bed waits to be shaken, aired, rebuilt, and defended for another night. Ahead, the passage remains cold, the stair colder, the yard beyond it white and hard beneath the morning. The castle has kept you alive, but only with help from every cloth, coal, hand, bowl, body, shutter, and habit inside it. You pull the cloak tighter, step toward the door, and carry a little of the bed's fading warmth with you until the draught takes its share. The door stays closed for one more breath. There is no need to hurry now. The worst of the night has passed, and the room has begun its slow return to use. The fire is small but awake. The blankets are heavy and rumpled. The rushes lie quiet underfoot. The curtain, loosened from its post, hangs with the tired patience of a thing that has done its work. You can leave the cold yard outside for a while longer. You can let the guards keep their watch, let the servants tend the hearth, let the kitchen find its steam, let the old stone walls hold whatever frost they insist on holding. The chamber does not become warm all at once. It simply becomes less impossible. The body remembers the night in pieces. The cap pulled low, the sleeve around the hand, the shared heat under wool, the stone at the feet warm and then fading, the ember under ash, the prayer half spoken in the dark. None of these things is large by itself, yet together they made a shelter small enough for sleep. And now the mind may set them down. The shutter holds, the wall hanging rests against the stone, the cup waits in its niche. Someone folds a coverlet with sleepy hands. Somewhere below, a door opens and closes, but the sound comes softly now, as if the castle has learned not to wake you fully. So let the room grow quieter again. Let the fire do its modest work. Let the cold stay beyond the next layer of cloth, beyond the next door, beyond the last clear thought of the evening. The bed is remade in memory, curtain by curtain, blanket by blanket, until there is only warmth enough, breath enough, and the slow, safe dark around you.